A man discovers an old radio that broadcasts unsettling messages, but the source of the voices is far closer than he thinks. The first time Jason laid eyes on the vintage radio, it was sitting in the corner of a dusty antique store, almost hidden under a pile of forgotten relics. Its wooden frame was worn but charming, and the brass knobs gleamed as though they hadn't seen a single finger trace them in decades. Jason, a lover of all things retro, couldn't resist. It was perfect for his collection. Something to evoke memories of a simpler time, a time when radios were the heart of every home. He bargained with the shopkeeper, paid a small sum, and left the store with his newest treasure. It felt like a connection to a past he never knew, a past full of untold stories and lost voices. Little did he know, this radio was far from ordinary. Its history was darker, and its future would entwine with his in ways he could never have imagined. Setting the radio up in his living room, Jason plugged it in and twisted the dial. At first, it played only static, the occasional crackle breaking through. It was the kind of static that made you feel like you were on the cusp of hearing something, but it always faded before anything intelligible came through. Jason wasn't discouraged. This was the charm of vintage radio. Patience was required to hear the magic. And sure enough, after a few days of fiddling with the dial, he started to hear faint snippets of old songs. The music was beautiful, calming even, a throwback to a time before his own. But it wasn't long before something odd happened. One evening, as Jason sat by the radio, he heard something different, something that didn't belong. A voice, low and grainy, whispering words that seemed just out of reach, as if someone was trying to speak through the static, but was being muffled by a deep, endless echo. The next time Jason turned the radio on, he heard it again. Voices. This time they were clearer, more distinct, but their message was cryptic, like a riddle wrapped in shadow. The voice spoke in fragmented sentences, too jumbled to make sense of, but one phrase stood out. "You always wanted to forget, but you can't." Jason's heart skipped a beat. What did that mean, forget? He was certain that he had never shared any personal secrets with anyone. No one knew him better than he knew himself. He turned the dial frantically, convinced the voices were a product of the static, just a trick of the mind. But the voice returned. "They're watching," it whispered. "They know everything." A chill ran down Jason's spine. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. How could this radio know things about him? Things he had never told a soul. The strange occurrences continued, and Jason's obsession with the radio grew. He couldn't help it. Every night he would sit in front of it, tuning the dial with an almost manic determination, hoping for more. The voices became more frequent, more specific, and increasingly personal. "Your mother never wanted you," one voice hissed. "You're just like your father," another sneered. With each message, Jason felt as though his very reality was crumbling. The radio was revealing things he had buried deep within his mind, things he had never spoken of, never shared with anyone. It wasn't just random static anymore. It was a sinister game, a game he couldn't walk away from. The voices would come to him in the dead of night, their words echoing in his mind even when he wasn't by the radio. The urge to listen became irresistible. He needed to understand, needed to uncover the secrets they were trying to reveal. But with every answer came more questions. One evening, as Jason was adjusting the radio, something utterly chilling happened. The voice, now clearer than ever, spoke his name. "Jason, you remember the basement, don't you?" His stomach twisted. He had tried to forget about that basement, that room, the place he never spoke of. The memories of the childhood game he played with his brother in that basement were painful to recall. His brother had disappeared in that very room when they were young, and Jason had never told anyone the truth about what had happened. "It's not your fault," the voice continued, "but you'll never escape it." Jason's breath quickened, panic surging in his chest. The radio seemed to be prying into his soul, pulling out his deepest fear. His eyes flicked nervously around the room. Was someone in his house? How could it possibly know this? Oh, the voice on the radio had crossed a line, and Jason was terrified of what it might say next. The radio's hold on him grew tighter. It was no longer just revealing his past. It was predicting his future. "You'll be late for work tomorrow," one voice predicted. And sure enough, the next morning, Jason overslept and arrived late. "You will forget your keys," the voice warned. warned another day. Jason had shrugged it off, certain it was just coincidence, but the predictions grew eerily accurate. You'll run into Sarah at the coffee shop, but she won't recognize you. And when he did, she didn't. The radio spoke with an unnerving certainty, almost as if it were watching his every move. Jason couldn't ignore it any longer. The radio was controlling his actions, and every time he resisted, the voices grew louder, more insistent, more direct. He tried to fight back, tried to make decisions without the radio's guidance, but the voices always found a way to be right. He was trapped in a cycle of prediction and obedience. And the worst part? The more he listened, the more the predictions came true. It was late one night when the voice, darker than it had ever been, uttered words that froze Jason's blood. "You have to leave now, Jason. The disaster is coming. It's already too late." Jason's heart raced. What disaster? He jumped to his feet, his mind racing. Was it a warning? Was this about the basement? No, he thought. It couldn't be. "Turn off the radio," Jason muttered to himself, but the voice didn't stop. "There's nowhere to run," it whispered. "Nowhere to hide." His mind spun, trying to piece together the puzzle. He couldn't ignore it. He had to act. Jason grabbed his jacket, grabbed his car keys, and ran out of his apartment, convinced that something terrible was about to happen. But as he stepped into the cold night, he felt a presence, a shadow that seemed to follow him, just out of sight. The radio had been right. The disaster was already in motion. In the days that followed, Jason found himself in a mad rush to stop whatever disaster the radio had warned him about. He couldn't make sense of it all, but he knew one thing. Something terrible was coming, and the radio was the only way to stop it. But every time he tried to act, something went wrong. The radio would call out to him, its voice guiding his steps, but Jason wasn't the one making the decisions. He was being manipulated, pulled by invisible strings, as though he were nothing more than a puppet in some twisted game. The realization hit him like a freight train. The radio wasn't just predicting his actions, it was controlling them. All along, it had been steering his every move, forcing him into a scenario that he could never escape. The disaster wasn't an event outside of him. The disaster was the radio itself. It started softly at first, whispers behind the walls, murmurs coming from the floorboard. Jason thought he was imagining things, but the noises grew louder, more insistent, until it felt as though the house itself was alive, pulsing with the voices of the radio. "We've been with you all along," the voice echoed from the walls. "And now we're inside you." Jason's mind fractured. Was he going mad? Or was the radio truly transcending its physical form, its power leaking out into the very fabric of his reality? He couldn't escape. The voices were everywhere now, beneath the floor, inside the walls, in the shadows. They controlled everything, even his very thoughts. Reality was slipping through his fingers, and Jason was no longer sure where the radio ended and he began. The final battle took place in the darkened corners of Jason's mind. He knew the radio had to be silenced, but how? It had been with him for so long, its voices burrowing deep into his psyche. He tried everything, smashing it with a hammer, disconnecting the power, even throwing it out the window, but the radio refused to be silenced. It whispered louder than ever, its grip tightening around him. "You can't escape us," it said. "You belong to us now." Jason collapsed to his knees, his mind at the breaking point. He was lost in the web of the radio's control. The voices had won, and as the final words echoed in his mind, Jason realized the horrible truth. The radio was never just broadcasting. It had always been broadcasting him, and there was no escaping the station's signal. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories. Share this with your friends, and leave a comment telling us about the most unsettling sound you've ever heard. Stay tuned for more stories that will keep you up at night.